Many space games have impressive ships, and they certainly have impressive visuals as well. They can struggle with something, and that is the idea of pressure. The idea of giving pressure on decisions that you make in the game, making decisions matter. And that's a line that separates a space game that can look good on a trailer from one that actually generates a really good story. And it's for this reason that I feel the new Battlestar Galactica game is really worth paying attention to. Because what the developers are showing here is that fleet combat and tactical battles, these are all survival options, but ultimately that every action, every jump in the game is going to have consequences. For me then, I feel Battlestar Galactica Scattered Hope is immediately interesting, and the reason for that is that, well, it's focusing on pressure rather than the regular space cliches. And that works if you're a fan of space games and if you're a fan of Battlestar Galactica. In fact, it's the thread that ties the two things together. Also, while I've got you here, if you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing to this video. This channel that really does benefit from all of that, helps get these videos out there. And yeah, I guess that's good for me, but it's also certainly good for these games as well. So you take on the role of the commander of a Gunstar, and your job is to escort a fleet of survivors after the fall of the 12 colonies. And your only chance is to make it back to the Battlestar Galactica with the Cylon fleet hot on your heels. Now, another interesting thing here is how the game treats time. Many games out there, space games included, can treat time as a resource, and that can lead to a grind and all sorts of things like that. Now, this game does treat time like a resource, but in a different way. That means your use of time is not focused on grinding. You're not wandering around doing side quests. Instead, you're spending turns burning away time and watching a countdown until the next attack from the Cylons. And ultimately, the developers seem to be suggesting you're never really going to be fully ready for that. And if you're a fan of the TV show, the one from 2003 onwards, well, you'll be well aware that's exactly the same feeling that the show is built on. The game itself then alternates between fleet management and combat. Fleet management itself gives you a limited number of turns to prepare, repair, upgrade, train crew, explore points of interest, and then the combat hits, and you really have to deal with the consequences of all the decisions you just made. So again, the key pressure point here is that countdown. Each action that you take costs turns, issues appear that you can't ignore forever, and the Cylons are essentially that timer. They're a force of nature, if you will, that you really have to prioritize against. So to do all this, the developers spoke about the resources that you're going to have to use and the methods that you'll have to take. So there's scrap, which is used as general currency and upgrade material. There's supplies to solve urgent problems on board your ships, Tilium to fuel the jumps and explore points of interest, and then of course nukes, which are powerful combat options. And another aspect here, which really does keep this very much Battlestar Galactica themed, is that you're not just concerned about the health of your ship. You do have a health bar for your ship, but you also have a separate overall bar for your fleet's health. And that means you have to keep check on both of these, because if either run out, then, well, ultimately that's the end run. You're finishing here, you're game over, and you'll need to go back to the start. So another layer here that is entirely separate from the resources we've discussed is people. You've got heroes, officers, high-profile crew, as we see in the TV show, and these can be sent to deal with problems, explore points of interest, and they grow traits over time. But these are human, so they do have issues that come with being human. That means you need to watch their health and their morale as well. As for the fleet itself, this is split into a number of factions. You've got military, civilians, and outlaws, and these can all influence each other, and they have rapport between each other, and they can shape events that trigger and ultimately determine how bad or how good things can get, as well as how often certain activities, certain events will happen. And this kind of comes back to the point I made at the start of the video about the pressure that you may feel in a game, and that might be absent in other games. It's very much present here, and that certainly creates a type of stress that you're going to be encountering throughout the game. At least that's the impression the developers are given here in their 9-minute long video. So you get situations, hull breaches, fires, Cylon boardings, illness, panic. Some of these are spontaneous and some are caused by faction relationships, and some are caused by combat damage. Each of these need to be resolved by either sending a hero, spending supplies, or ultimately, in the end, you can just ignore them and take the hit when the countdown expires and see what happens, because I guess you're not going to have time to fix absolutely everything. That is all part of the ongoing pressure. Now, at some point, some of this is certainly going to be sabotage, because yes, you guessed it, there's an infiltrated Cylon on board, an imposter, and you have to unmask them through an investigation system. It seems then that the developers have spent a lot of time trying to tie a game in to the TV series and really keep that Battlestar Galactica feel, but also make it a very good space game. That seems to be the aim here, and in my opinion, they're on the right track. That then is the shape of what we get here. You've got limited time, scarce resources, volatile people, and then fights that, you're probably not going to win. You just need to survive long enough to get away. Now, something that the developers made very much apparent is the game's focus on crisis versus opportunities, and this is kind of a choice architecture, I guess, if you like, if you want to see it that way. Crises are the big ones. You step into the combat in the CIC, the Combat Information Center, you get a brief in there, and you're offered two choices. You either take an objective-based timed mission with harsh consequences if you fail, or you take an immediate solution that's often expensive in resources or political capital. And again, I really do feel that this both connects Battlestar Galactica, but also fits in with a quality game structure as well. You've also got the opportunities I mentioned. These are time-limited tasks that can reward you, but failing them doesn't punish you. So you're constantly weighing here, do I gamble time for the bonus here, the potential upside, or do I preserve the stability I've already got? The dev team also pointed out that once per sector, there's even a bar mechanic where you can spend time to smooth relationships and offset the consequences of the choices you've previously made. And I really like this. I guess at this point you probably guess I'm a big fan of the TV show, and this very much reminds me of those episodes where people just, they kind of make up and they forgive the transgressions of what happened in previous episodes or previous seasons, and then they move on. The dev team also spoke about points of interest, and these seem to be quite an important piece of the overall game. But they do come with some risks, so these points of interest, they vary across sectors. They can replenish various different resources that you'll use along the way, but they also burn tilium, which of course is your fuel, and they can also be, they add meaningful pieces to your run. You might find new squadrons, weapons, heroes, or even civilian ships. Heroes themselves gain traits from doing these things, traits that don't just, not just number buffs, but they can change what they can do. They give you abilities such as piloting squadrons, or manning the Gunstar weapons, or even improving the rarity of points of interest rewards. So exploration is not simply about going here or there, instead it's a way to shape the run itself, then you're going to have to determine whether or not you can afford the time to do that. And that brings us on to combat. So according to what the devs have shown, this is asymmetrical, and that by design. In other words, the Cylons are much stronger than you. The Cylons outnumber you, and the clock becomes a very literal thing here. You get 2 minutes every time the Cylons arrive. That 2 minutes is what it takes for the FTL calculations for you to jump to the next sector. And during that time, you're going to have to defend the fleet. Before the fight, there's a deployment phase. You choose the squadron, the Gunstar loadout, and you get Dradus, which is effectively the radar equipment that previews what enemies will spawn and what enemies will likely spawn. So, as you might expect here, the squadrons you deploy, they all have their own functions and way of attacking, and the Gunstar itself, that you control, the main military vessel you've got, also has its own starting weapons. These will all depend on the starting fleet, but you can acquire new weapons through your run. And then the most interesting thing, just at the last minute you have to leap away, as we just saw on the screen right there, and that means you have to recall your squadron before you actually do that, because you do not want to leave people behind. So the game is roguelike, as you may have guessed, and that means you're going to be doing multiple runs on this, and for this you actually get fate, which is something that you gain every time you complete a run, and you can then invest that into upgrades that give your future fleets a head start, extra resources, improved rarity of hero traits, and squadron perks, things such as that. There's also things called trials in the way here, and these are feats and tasks that are completed during a run, and these grant knowledge and new unlocks for starting fleets and squadrons and more. So, looking at what they've shown so far about Scattered Hope, it really feels like they're aiming for a good balance here between a game and being faithful to the TV series. And it looks like they got a few threads that connect the two things together. And as I said right at the start of the video, I really do feel that the through line for that is the pressure. In fact, if any space TV franchise is ripe for the roguelike recipe, it is of course Battlestar Galactica. Let me know what you think about all of this in the comments section below, because I would love to hear from you. Would you rather see a completely different take, or do you feel that this is the right approach for this type of game? Look forward to hearing from you. Do watch the other video on the screen right here. Take care, and I'll catch you next time.